So, sighting is a system where you measure things like the width of an object and compare that width to other areas within your picture plane. So, you can compare the width to the height. So, here I'm showing you the width of that vase. So, we're looking at a still life. Here is the width, so how wide it is. And then we're going to compare that to the height. And how many times does a width fit within that height of the vase? So the height is yellow. So there's the height of the vase itself. But you could also add on to that the extension of the bouquet, the flowers. And then you can ask yourself how many widths will fit into the height. So you have to flip it so the width is wide horizontally. And if you were to flip it vertically, how many widths fit in there? You're going to ask, this is math. Why are we doing math in an art class? It's because this is a system to measure things and compare. Once you have a unit, so like for example, that width, you can use it as a basis for comparison for other objects within that picture plane. So if you saw that, I just measured and you can fit 2.5 widths into that flower vase. So there is 2.5 widths fit within that that height of the vase and the flowers. So what else can you compare? Now I'm going to grab a different unit of measure. I'm going to look at that lemon. I could also compare the width of the lemon to the width of the vase. And I can tell just by looking at it here that the lemon is a little bit smaller than the width of the vase. But I'm also looking, where does that width of the lemon fit anyplace else? And I'm noticing that that middle flower is about the same width as the lemon. So there are things you can do to help figure out the size of things. Always keep in the back of your mind the rule about space and how things go back in space. Like the objects that are up closer to you should, in theory, be bigger, and the ones that are farther back should get progressively smaller. I also do something where I look at where the top of the object would hit another object. That's what those pink dashed lines are for. So I'm asking myself, where does that top of that kind of block, that rectangular block, hit on the vase? And I ask myself about those pyramid shaped blocks to the triangular shaped ones. Where is the top of that hitting on the vase? I'd probably do the same thing to the bottom as well. It's like, where does that top of that lemon hit on the vase? And you don't have to actually draw a line. You can just envision it, or you can hold your pencil out like you did in angular transfer to see. So here's what I'm going to show you. This is what it looks like. In order to measure, you need to take on the same stance that you did for angular transfer. So you have to extend your arm fully out, so don't bend your arm. And then you hold your pencil to the object. And what you want to do is align the tip of the pencil, the point of the pencil, to the edge of your object. So I'm just going to draw over this so you can see it. You use your thumbnail or your fingernail to close off that measurement. So I'm using my thumbnail as a placeholder. I'm telling myself that's the width. Once you have that, you can use that as a basis for comparison. That's your unit. That's what we're going to call it. It's your unit of measure. So you would just randomly do 2 marks to indicate the width of your vase, and then from there you have your width, and you can compare that to the height, and you can compare that to other things. So there's the point of the pencil. Here's the width is from the point of the pencil to wherever my thumbnail is. And I do understand this is confusing, but this is a tactic that a lot of artists employ. Okay, so here's what you're doing with your extended arm, and you're looking at your pencil. You're using that point to measure, and then you're closing it off with a fingernail. I usually use my thumb or my index finger to close off a shape and use that as a point of measure. This is difficult to show you how to do it because I can't get the camera to focus on the pencil without completely blurring out the vase. But you can see I'm holding the pencil tip up to the edge, and then I'm placing my thumb at the right hand side of the vase, so I close off that angle, keeping my arm locked and extended. I compare it to the height. So I was looking at that brown part and comparing. It's pretty close to that height. So the height and the width of just the brown area on the vase are similar, but it's a little bit longer on that brown area. So I'm getting information about how to do this. And here I am again measuring that width. So taking that pencil point, grabbing that measurement, and comparing it to other areas within that frame that I'm looking at. So you should only be looking at directly in front of you. You shouldn't have to tilt your head or look at a funny angle. It should be the objects that are right in front of you. You can pick anything for your unit of measure to start you off. I'm going to measure the vase, and I'm looking at the height of the vase in particular, and I'm measuring from the bottom of the vase to where the brown part meets the white. So that's what those 2 marks are going to indicate. So I just arbitrarily pick those 2 marks. I'm going to use that as a basis for comparison. So if I take the brown mark from the brown of the base, from the bottom to where it meets the white, if I stack another one of those heights, exactly the same measurement, one on top of the other, then that is the measurement for the white part of the vase plus the flowers, because I can stack 2 of those and fit them in evenly. And it's okay if this is confusing. It is hard. So that is the height. Once I have the height, I can use that as a basis of comparison for other things that are happening in this scene that I'm looking at. So I'm only focused on the still life that's set up on the table. And you can see I'm measuring, holding out my arm, extending it fully, measuring, and then comparing that to other areas and then taking it to my paper. You do the same kind of thing where you close one eye when you measure, at least I do, to make sure I have the correct measurement and my vision's not skewed by looking through both eyes. So that right there, you can start to see it. That is the bottom of the vase. To look at where that lemon is positioned, I'm looking at where the top of the lemon would hit if I were to draw a horizontal line where it would touch on the vase. I'm also looking for how low that lemon is on that foreground meaning the tabletop. And that lemon is in front of that vase, so I'm positioning it to make it look like it's in front of the vase, so it's overlapped. And there I'm using angular transfer, so you actually want to employ angular transfer as well, because there is an angle in that kind of pyramid or triangular shaped cube. It's a 3D cube. So this is a way of translating something that is 3D onto a 2D surface. Measurement is something that I use all the time too when I'm working from a photo reference. We measure things all the time as artists, so if you're doing a face, you know some of those facial proportion rules, you would use that as your measurement guide. Like one eye can fit in between 2 eyes, one eye can fit underneath the nose to the upper lip. When you're drawing people, you usually use the measurements in terms of heads, how many heads fit into the body. How many heads wide is the shoulders? And maybe you've heard this before. So finding a basis of comparison and then using it as a point of reference for the entire drawing. And when you're drawing here, it does not have to be perfect. It's more important that you get the essentials down first, which is very simplified, the bare structure or the bones of the drawing. If you have time, then you can proceed forward with adding more information to the drawing. This is to be done in your sketchbook, or if you don't have a sketchbook, you can do it on an 18 by 24 sheet of paper. Just you don't have to do it to that full size. I'm looking for about a 9 by 12. You should fill the page with the majority of your work. Try and put in a horizon line too, so you have a foreground, background, and you have the objects that are occupying that middle ground space. So what you're seeing me do is just like a rough sketch to figure it out, but you see there I'm putting in using angular transfer to get some of that stuff. So try both of those techniques. Again, straight arm, lock your arm when you do it, close one eye when you're measuring, use your point of your pencil and your fingernail, and don't hesitate to ask for help if you need some help or guidance on how to do this. To be doing this too, I'm going to have you set up a still life. I have a variety of objects I'm going to leave on the back counter for your group to select. And I say group, but I really mean like your table if you're at a table. Ideally, we would be all at a table. If you're not, then we have those little side tables that we can put a still life on as well. Or you can reorient the standing easels so that they are near the table so you can look that way and see your still life setup. Remember, when you're putting together a still life, you want to think about things like overlap and creating an interesting composition, although it's hard to do if 4 people are looking at it.